So I was born a boy, and that was a very long time ago. I don't think we have to go in there. And for most of my adolescent life and a good portion of my adult life, the transgender issues were hidden. I lived in the closet for a long time, and I was so far back in there that if someone opened the door, it would take light about 3 days to get to where I was. And eventually that situation could not endure. And so about 10 or 12 years ago, I pretty much came out of the closet, so I spent long hours on the road, and I did that as a guy. Hanging out at truck stops as a girl is not really a prudent thing to do, I don't think, but so that was about the only place that I was living as a guy. When I would come home, I would have a week off. I had every third week off, and that whole week I spent as Julie. And now I'm not working, and I live as Julie full time. And I go where I want to go. I do what I want to do. One of the things that I have noticed in these classes, I've done a few with Charissa before, is a lot of folks think that gender and orientation are identical. They're the same. They're not. And that's one of the things that makes trans folks kind of hard to explain, because you can have trans folks that are straight, you can have trans folks that are gay, and you can have trans folks that are somewhere in between. And that's probably where I am, somewhere in between. So I guess with that, I'll pass it off to Sherry.
My name is Sherry, and I'm a lesbian. As far as I remember, I've always been a lesbian. Probably unconsciously, I first knew when I was about in 7th grade. And I didn't really act on anything until, late, probably like 22. I had a partner for 26 years, so maybe different than some of the other folks. I was a teacher for a long time, and I felt especially sensitive around young kids that were struggling with their identity, that I could kind of see they were struggling with their identity too. So anyway, glad to be here. Very good, thanks. Lauren?
Hi, I'm Lauren. I am straight, and I'm here because I am an LGBTQ ally here at Delta. And I guess if I were to explain sort of how I got involved in LGBTQ issues, I guess I sort of associated with a couple of things: personal connection and education. I grew up in the Philadelphia area, and Philly in general is a very gay positive kind of town. It has a great gay neighborhood. The city of brotherly love really does sort of embrace people of all kinds. And my best friend from high school is gay, and I have been with him through his whole process of coming out and then moving into adulthood. And then when I was older and learning how to be a teacher, I just had an opportunity to study multicultural issues, and that's really sort of informed who I am as a teacher. And being an advocate and being a supportive figure is pretty central to my professional life. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.
My name is Dave Bailey. I work here at Delta College. Actually, right now I'm sort of serving in the role of Charissa's supervisor. That'll be up towards the end of April here, so.
It's a tough job, Dave, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. I grew up in Ohio. Went through school, graduate school, came here in '96. That's when I came out. So I guess if I'm trying to align myself with one of the LGBT letters there, I would be the G. And I would second the comment that Julie made, that there's a distinction between transgendered and orientation. I see myself as a guy. I very much feel that I'm a guy, but I'm also attracted to guys. So that's kind of how I would sum up that situation. I'm trying to think when Charisse has been around for a good chunk of me coming out. I think it was maybe the first year that, during the first year that I went to, that I was here, that I went to a gay bar in downtown Saginaw, and I started dating. I've come out to my classes. I've talked to my classes about sexual orientation as part of the curriculum that I teach. It's not anything particular that they would exactly be tested on, but it's just part of the regular topic of one of the classes that I teach. I've also been involved with some civic engagement activities. There is a group in the area that's a GLBT advocacy group. I was involved in helping to get that established, working with a group called the Triangle Foundation out of Detroit. And they're still no longer working with the group. I've since moved to Genesee County, but they seem to still be alive and well. I get their regular membership emails, and the group's name is Perception. I'm currently in a relationship with somebody who works at University of Michigan Flint, and I guess as far as questions goes, I would encourage you, for at least myself, to feel free to ask anything that you want to. If it's not something that I'm really prepared to answer, I'll just say so. No, I'm done. Okay. So I would rather that you be more, if there's something that's on your mind and you want to ask, please ask the question. Don't, and I'm pretty open about most things, so you're probably going to get an answer. Just make sure you're ready to hear it. I'm sorry?
Be careful what you wish for.
That's right. Don't ask the question unless you're ready to hear the answer.
So who wants the first question? We're going to go around the room. We're going to do this differently because we don't all ask questions. So I'm going to have everybody ask a question, but we're going to go around the room. And Noah's ready to start, so go ahead.
My brother is gay, and it was pretty hard growing up. He didn't come out until after high school, and he had a hard time. Throughout high school, he got picked on quite a bit. You have to excuse me, I have a bit of a cold. I always made it clear to him that he was my brother and that I would love him no matter what. But he still had a really tough time, and he recently married. He met his fiance in Barcelona, Spain, and they were able to get married there. So he's living there currently, and he loves it. But I can see that he and his husband David maybe want to come back here at some point. What's your outlook on marriage in this country? I mean,
In this country,
Yeah.
I think it depends on where you go
Yeah.
and where you're coming to. I'd have a hard time recommending Michigan
Yeah.
right now. But there, I
the
mean,
future
there's.
of it though. I mean, you think it eventually.
I think that the legislation that we're seeing at the state level on the West Coast and on the East Coast in New York, I think eventually that's going to bring along the federal government, and and then I think that there's going to be a tipping point with the states where the federal government has to address it in some capacity, and that'll bring everybody else along. But that's just my guess. I mean, my background is genetics and biology. I'm by no means a political scientist here. I just watch the issues.
Does anybody else want to throw out their thoughts on that from panel, Lauren, do you have what do you think about same-sex marriage?
I was thinking as you were talking, I was remembering in the early 2000s, I knew a social work professor who felt that the issue of gay marriage was eventually going to cause another civil war. You know, he thought that it was going to be that polarizing, and at the time, I thought you're overreacting. I'm sure that's not true. You know, but I have to confess that was when I lived in a liberal bubble, and everybody that I talked to really, you know, sort of thought the same way. And since moving here to Michigan, I've only lived here for a couple of years, I find that I'm still kind of surprised at the level of conservatism, you know, that we all sort of experience. And I would just encourage everybody who's passionate about this issue to just keep lobbying, keep advocating, okay? Because people who oppose this want everybody to shut up and go away. And, you know, and I'm married myself, and I want everybody to be able to get married. And I'm going to do what it takes to have that happen.
I think that if one associates with people from the LGBT community on a regular basis, you see a lot of inequities because of that. I was recently talking with a gentleman that had been in a long-term relationship, I don't remember how many years it was, but his partner was extremely well-to-do, to the tune of his net worth was over $11 million. Well, when the partner died, the fellow that I was talking to, the will said he was to inherit everything except Grandma's china. And Grandma's china was supposed to go to a cousin who lived in Ohio. Between the cousin and the attorneys, they got it all. Every bit of it. And that's just one issue. There's also the issue that you can be in a long-term relationship and your partner gets sick and has to go to the hospital. You can't get in to see him.
So even though there was a will,
Even though there was will.
the estate still went to someone else.
Because it didn't recognize him as a legal partner.
Yeah. And it's, like David was saying, here in Michigan, the laws are basically atrocious.
I was in a relationship for 26 years, and I pretty much considered that I was married.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't legally do it, but I pretty much was married. And my partner at one period, at one time, was struggling with some other issues and was in a hospital. And so it was difficult to be able to, I mean, I wanted to be there, I wanted to help, I wanted to do whatever I could do, and it was very hard. I was lucky to be in a somewhat liberal kind of hospital setting, so they did, there was no other family around, so I don't even, at this point, I don't even remember if I lied and said she was my sister, you know, but just to kind of do that. So that was related to this issue. And then I've had two friends that died of breast cancer, both who were lesbian. One of them died when she was very young, at age 36, and her family came in and pretty much took everything. So the other partner was a little older and, you know, was settled and had an income and stuff like that. But if some of that had been, you know, not as stable for her, there might have been a difference. And then the other friend too, they owned a business together as well. And when Charlene passed away, then Elizabeth was left with a real mess. And she had, and it was another case where Elizabeth, who had passed away, Charlene, who had passed away, family was much more well-to-do and kind of old South money from Atlanta, and so it was there was a lot of taking of stuff. So
It's tough.
I think
insurance too. I mean,
Yeah, insurance coverage and end of life situations, hospice and all.
I think the national dialogue, recently I heard somebody summarize a conservative perspective as fundamentally believing that there's one truth and that we probably have found it. Where a liberal perspective acknowledges that we haven't found it or that there are going to be multiple perspectives. And I think that that's the essence of, I think, of what's going on with this discussion right now, because it's very difficult for somebody who's actually experiencing these kinds of identity issues to, while there might be that internal motivation to question whether you're gay or whether you're lesbian or transgendered, and it's so difficult to shift your perspective to figure out how that way of life can work. For somebody who has never had that kind of attraction or has never had the reason to question their own identity in any number of ways, it's almost a question that doesn't ever make it onto the table to ask. And it seems to me that this would be one of the things that would be so difficult for people to acknowledge, that there's more than one truth and more than one way to look at it. And I think that that's what the battle is. It's not about who I'm attracted to. It's being able to get people to understand that my experience isn't theirs in a very real way, and not just because I choose to be different.
The other thing I was thinking of as we were talking is, I have a nephew who's really struggling. He's like 21. He has, I would guess that he's going to be one of the Qs there on the list. And he cross-dresses, and he has very close guy friends, most of whom look more feminine, but they're all very young and they're all very thin, and so I think he's really struggling with that. And I'm just glad that he's growing up now instead of 30, 40 years ago when I grew up. And then I also have a sister who is just recently divorced, and her husband came out as gay. So if it had been more open 30, 40 years ago, would it have been easier for, Dan to not hide in his first marriage and then have a couple kids who now it's affecting their lives, and then hide in his second marriage and, have a couple of stepkids and have it affect their lives? And if it just could have been a little cleaner. Fortunately, I was lucky. I didn't have a whole lot of, I knew what my mom and dad didn't agree with, and as soon as I turned 22, I left and went to 1,000 miles away and kind of grew up.
That's one thing, my parents were pretty understanding, which was nice.
Yeah.
My dad, he disagrees with it, and he's not happy about it, but it's his son, and he doesn't, that doesn't change anything, so.
There's all these different levels of coming out. So, first you have to come out to yourself. Then you have to come out to those close to you, usually your family or your friends. And then you have to come out to society as a whole. And actually right now, we're struggling with, society needs to come out with these issues, because they are impacting the lives of people, beyond, for instance, Danny. That's impacting his children. That's impacting, all these other folks, beyond just one individual that we want to point our finger at and say they're LGBT. It impacts everyone. We all should have a role in this. So that means you're up next, Ray. Got a question? Just jumping over to
I don't understand the level of fear that society throws at people that are different. In this country, we were raised with a hard religious, I understand that. Okay, but we've got to the point where we can accept that you're a Baptist or you're a Protestant or whatever. But yet, when it comes to sexual orientation, it's this fear factor. There's a, you know the movie, I can't think of the name of that movie, Tom Hanks plays the gay lawyer. Philadelphia. The lawyer is scared to death that people are going to think that he must have this problem simply because of the fact that he's defending the legal rights of this person. Why do we have such a tremendous level of fear about something that we don't understand? I mean, I know that that's part of it, but I don't understand why it has to be such a hatred, such a fearful issue. I don't understand that.
That, in my never to be humble opinion, that's where prejudice is born, is in the fear. And people fear the things that they don't understand. And it's been that way pretty much forever. That's one of the reasons I enjoy doing these classes with Charisse, is because the more we can push back those frontiers of ignorance, the better off we're going to be. And it's kind of strange in some ways, because I've had people, close friends, say, look, you have to be extremely courageous.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true. I have to be who I am. And so it's not a matter of courage. I just have to be who I am and hope that other people that I meet will relate to me. And most of them do. But I thought about my daughter in the same respect. A lot of people tell her that she has to be courageous because she has MS. It's not courage. You have to deal with what life has given you. And
At that level, it's grace.
yeah,
It's your choice of how poised do you wish to be with this.
When I got hurt 4 years ago, I broke 2 vertebrae in my neck, and I had to deal with it. It was a mess. It took a long time. It took a year, but after a while, you come around, you just have to do what you have to do. Regardless if it's easy or not, you just have to do it. So.
I think it's interesting that you prefaced part of your remarks with how religious we are as a country. But I find it interesting that so much of these inequities that we have to deal with are caused by religions that are so hardline in their outlook.
Promote fear.
And promote fear, yeah. I mean, the old fire and brimstone stuff, but yet if we follow Christ's rule, and I don't want to get into a real religious thing here, but Christ said, love your neighbor as yourself. And if everybody did that, we would have a lot less problems.
I think in general, people are taught to fear. And I think it's the institutions that we have that teach us what to fear and what not to. Because I have experienced very few individuals that took issue with who I was as an on a one-on-one level. Maybe not so much when you start talking about a group.
Yeah, do you see an individual accepts you as who you are, but when they're with their peer group, then they have that shield?
Yeah, this is what our doctrine is. So, this is where it will come from, hate the sin, not the sinner would be the perfect example of that.
Correct.
We got a long way to go on that one. That's where the crux of it is right now. Justin has a question.
I'm at the other end where my father was gay. He had 2 kids, left when I was a year old. So I had to grow up with having people know in school, they found out after my dad passed away in '93 of AIDS. So it just kind of flooded through the school, so then I was ridiculed and people were calling me gay, and I had to deal with that growing up. Even though I'm not, I'm straight, but I had to figure out how to deal with my father leaving me, my father being gay, my father having AIDS and then passing away, and trying to grow up with all of that. I mean, you mentioned that you have a child yourself. Did your child have any problems growing up in school?
I was not out when the kids were in school, and unfortunately, I think it might have been easier for them if I had come out, because I do think that young children have an infinite capacity to deal with issues, and perhaps because of, like David said, we have to be taught to hate and fear, and if they can learn some of those things before they're carefully taught those emotions, those negative emotions, then they can deal with it. And but they seem, in many cases, to deal with it much better than adults do. And after I came out, the only folks that I really have a challenge with is my two children. I still have the same number of friends or more than I had before, and but my children, like this gentleman mentioned, don't understand, and I understand that they don't understand, because there's a lot of times that I don't understand why I'm the way that I am either. I just have to deal with it. Other people don't.
It sounds like you dealt with something very different, though, Justin, like that you were kind of abandoned. You didn't have a relationship with your father? Or?
Not at all.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah,
That's a whole
that's
different story.
very tough.
That's a different story.
But it definitely is related to the fact that we live in a somewhat oppressive society to GLBT folks, so that he felt like he probably needed to be in the closet, needed to get married, needed to follow the script. He was following the script that he was given when, he grew up, and everything he watched on TV and everything he saw, for family life was that. So he was following the script, and then too late figured out, I'm sure he knew, that he couldn't live that script anymore. And unfortunately, that was very damaging.
And his best friend lived right next door. He was gay, but he always was clear about it from the start. But he didn't come out until he married and had 2 kids.
I mean, maybe some of the first part of it is that we need to be more open with who we are. We can only get in touch with that and in tune with that, so that we don't have things like that happen, because it has so much impact on others. When we start impacting others' lives.
Of course, there's a lot of fear with that too. There's
Right.
Most any LGBT person who is not out of the closet, if you talk to them about coming out, that is a
Because they have a world of fear that they
Oh,
have to face.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
you're like caught between a rock and a hard spot in
Mhm.
that position.
yeah, absolutely.
But when you mentioned that your father died of complications of AIDS, why doesn't, this is something biological that I don't understand, is where does the world get this, that AIDS is a gay disease? I don't get that. AIDS is a disease, it kills people. It doesn't have anything to do with your gender or nothing. It's a disease, it kills people. Where does that come from?
It's
Well,
the
the-
history. It's the history, it's the epidemiology, how it came into the U.S.
The
Are
informed
you
people
familiar
don't
with
think
that
that
story?
way. The early people think that way only because the earliest cases of HIV were identified in young gay males. And then that was the population that grew the largest at first.
Right.
And it was the easiest to identify. And so
But even if it did start in the
Right.
homosexual society or whatever, it spread beyond that in a matter of no time, because it's a disease, it kills people. Science needs to get that, that's one of my big pet peeves, as you can tell. you
So
know.
let's get back to there's a one truth idea. Okay, so you're coming to it from the truth of your reality is science and all the trappings that come with science. Things are measurable, things are predictable, things are reproducible. Things don't happen out of a judgment, they happen because of cause and effect. And the mechanism can be explained. But not everyone has that. Someone who embraces religion above other forms of knowing their universe is going to come to that with an entirely different set of assumptions, and they will draw completely different sets of conclusions. So this doesn't have to be a scientific mechanism, it can just be retribution for sinful lives. And, however you want, but that's the one truth.
And I think people can know something rationally, and they can't accept it emotionally. You can learn over and over, yes, it's a disease, it spreads through these kinds of contact, but if you have this whole other packet of fear with you, that is going to sort of affect how you respond to things. If you're just freaked out by other in general, it's just easier and more comfortable to just sort of redefine it, even though you know from science and from everything else that what you're believing is not quite true. We make the most complicated decisions for the simplest of reasons. And it's often has this emotional core that people just really struggle with.
It's good. Martell?
I'd like to go back into the bullying, especially in light of what just happened in Michigan with the bullying isn't bullying if it's from a moral standpoint. I don't know what I can do about it. And I don't know if there is anything I can do about it, but there has to be, right? But what can the average person do to prevent these young kids from struggling the way they are?
Let me say a couple of things in preface to this.
Yeah.
She's referring to the law. It was called Matt's Law. It was named for Matt Epling. He was a young boy who was bullied and committed suicide. And this law has been in our legislation in the state of Michigan for 4 years. And every time it goes before a vote, they don't want to approve it because it's had sexual orientation and gender identity in it. So they've taken it out or slowed it down or blocked it. And this last time they said, okay, we'll let that be in there, but we're going to add a clause. It's okay if you can bully on those reasons if you can cite moral or religious grounds.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's disgusting, dude.
I know, it's totally
I can't
disgusting.
believe that.
What-
That's not good.
I can't
Bullying
even-
is just plain wrong.
So,
No matter how you language
So-
it.
so the answer to your question is to work the legislative process. What can you do to raise awareness in your immediate area? Who's your state representative? Who can you talk about those sorts of things? By the time we hear about these sorts of things in the state legislature, it's a little difficult to do anything about it other than emailing or calling your rep to say where you stand on a particular issue. But it's a lot of these things come up because of groundswells, so you need to ask for your representatives and the people that are around you that are like-minded to be willing to stand up and make your positions known. In these kinds of situations, it's, being passive is as much of a problem as somebody aggressively working to have language in there like that, because you are only getting the 10% of the people that are opposed to it actually standing up and saying something.
I will put up 2 videos on our e-learning site that shows what's been going on in the legislature. Actually, right now is a very critical time because they're still listening. And they're being, people need to flood their representatives with where they are, their point of view. Because it's just a very critical time.
But any law that excludes the abuser is useless law.
Actually, what this law does is give the abuser a license to abuse. It gives them the script for how to abuse and get away with it.
You can They'll
That-
go online and find them. Right?
There was a young boy in North Dakota a few years ago that was beaten to death because he was gay. Yeah. How can you possibly say that that's okay?
Happens all the time. We just
And
saw
when
it.
I believe the argument is called it's panic defense.
When
I
you-
hit
when you
on
go-
you and.
So I'm afraid of you, and you're already knocked out, but I get to keep thumping on you because that's... I'm
And it's
sorry.
worked. And it's worked.
And what happens to me as a teacher, having been a teacher for 30 years or so, is that I immediately, when I see that kind of legislature, I think, legislation, I think of faces of kids that I know are going to struggle with that. I think of my little kindergarten girl, Barbara, in her tough jean jacket, and she's so proud of being a tomboy. And then I think of little Aaron, who wanted to play in housekeeping and be with the girls and could hardly wait to be a cheerleader when he grew up, 5 years old. And then Andy, who was just the most soft-spoken, young man who's got all these big, tough, big brothers with him, and just worry about them. What's going to happen to them when they get to middle school, when they get to high school. And they're not hurting anybody else. I mean, so
It's just
I put
sad
faces. I put
experience.
faces when I see that. I see faces.
I think that the key thing, independent of the legislation, if you see somebody in that sort of situation, is particularly in high school, is to communicate to them it will get better. And high school is probably at the point in your life where you're most aware of needing to be in control, and you're the least in control of everything, including your own body. And it's one of those things that, and I think that it's that combination of things that leaves people in so much despair. And to communicate that it will get better if they just stick it out. Because by the time they can get into college, by the time they can get a job, they can start creating their own world like all of us do. It has to get better.
And then there's all kinds of untold stories, like my first cousin, Alice, who was the oldest of 12 kids in a farm family in Wisconsin, and was very tomboyish, never married, didn't date, started using drugs, started doing alcohol. I mean, by the time she was 45 or 50, she was dead. Now, I'm willing to bet that she struggled with LGBT,
Right.
I'm almost positive.
And that certainly adds to, the substance abuse and the domestic violence and all of that, because there's just that many more barriers to overcome.
I think the other thing that we can all do is be an advocate. Like, as Laura's talking about, and join advocacy groups, and definitely don't be a passive bystander. So you hear people use the word, "that's so gay," all the time. You hear people bash folks and stereotype folks, and it's time to maybe step up and speak out. So that's another thing you can do. In the long run, that makes a difference. If we had more people, kind of saying, I don't think that anyone should be treated that way. I don't think that's any justification for bullying someone, for abusing someone. And we kept saying that over and over. It would ripple out. It's that ripple effect, and it takes years and years, but it's got to start somewhere.
If you just think of your own sphere of influence, who do you talk to every day, and what are they expressing that you could respond to? And you do sort of, I try to do exactly what Charissa is saying, which is just sort of call people on their behavior. Not always in a confrontational way, because that might not get me so far, but just to open a dialogue about it. Not just to not let it keep going unacknowledged, okay? Because that's part of the problem. I teach English, and I was in class the other day, and I had my students write personal ads for each other. We were talking about paragraphs. And I have one male student saying about another male student, but this is going to make me sound fruity if I say something nice about Sean. Okay, so then I have to stop and, we have to have a discussion. It's my responsibility. I have to talk to them about why that's not the kind of language that's really appropriate. And you don't have to be all PC police about it, but you just have to sort of acknowledge what's going on and how you could do things differently. I said, look, do you want Sean to be happy? Do you want Sean to find someone? Well, yes. So that's all we have to do. Just be willing to put a name to things is what I would suggest, and be there for people if they need someone to talk to.
Tomas, what's your burning question?
Oh, I got a couple comments first and then a question. I don't consider myself to be a homophobe at all, and I really feel like, I'm comfortable with anybody, regardless of their sexual orientation. But I realized a couple things recently. One last night, I just happened to be flipping through the channels and started watching this movie I hadn't seen before. I don't know if anybody knows who Bing Rames is.
Yeah.
Big guy.
Yeah.
Big black guy, just muscular. And he was in this movie, and it turns out he's gay in this movie.
Heart to Heart?
Holiday Hearts. And I've always seen him in these big gangster movies where he's real masculine. Really, he's the man. And so after I seen him play this role, it really changed my perception of him. And I never thought about how that would change my perception. And I don't know if he's gay or not. Actually, in reality, I don't know. He just played the role. But it kind of changed my image of him, because I seen him as this, tough guy.
He was a gay drag queen
Yeah.
in that movie.
Yeah, it was a good movie, excellent movie.
Yeah.
And but it was amazing how much it changed my perspective of him.
I'm gonna use that, and I'm not trying to pick on you, but I'm gonna ask the group to recognize the dynamic, because I'm sure that I would expect, maybe not, that everyone in here has been challenged by seeing something like that. I mean, you started out saying that you're not a homophobe, and I'll be the first one to say there are just times when I'm sitting around some of my friends where I cannot sit still for one to get out of the room, because I'm I'm just like, it can make me uncomfortable.
Right.
And there it is. I mean, that's it. It's just, for whatever reason, maybe that same behavior 2 days later isn't going to be an issue for me, but it is right there at that time. But societally, what you were challenged by this conception of what this particular actor should be, and in your discussion you said this is a very masculine presentation that this person usually has, and the shock to see him present in a different way. And I would say that is a reasonably consistent experience for people that don't see LGBT anywhere around them. And there are people that just really do not believe that it's in Michigan.
Right.
I mean, I've had students that said that just said that, I didn't think we had any gays in Michigan. I checked passports, and I have a green card when I come in to visit my parents. But
that could be the same kind of reaction too when someone makes the decision to come out.
right,
If there's someone who was in the closet and portrayed a certain
exactly.
image.
So, yeah, and I would ask, what is it that makes that a difficult thing? What makes that transition difficult?
Well, I don't think it was difficult, it was shocking. And not only that, it was shocking that, I guess it was more shocking that he had the gall. Because a lot of men that feel they're masculine and they have that persona won't put themselves in that position and act like, oh, somebody might think I'm actually gay, but I'm going to act this. He did a very good job acting it.
So what's the risk in doing that?
Perception.
Opening people's eyes.
Now, is it really just what people are going to say? is it? I mean, that's what I'm asking.
Okay,
That's
and
what I'm trying to.
one of my other comment was, and like I said, I don't feel like I'm homophobe, but I'm realizing some things. And I have 4 boys, okay? I have 2 boys right now that are 3 and 4, okay? And I remember thinking, and maybe subconsciously thinking, or looking for any signs that they might be gay, only because I know what kind of difficulties they would encounter.
Right.
And I have 1 daughter.
No
So
parent.
the daughter is not, I'm not really concerned, because I know that it's more socially accepted for her to be lesbian than the males are to be gay. So I even though I don't think I'm hopeful, I'm like almost checking and making sure that, you know what,
So,
hopefully they're not going to be.
So my perception is no parent wants their child to be gay or lesbian or transgendered because of the much more difficult road.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, that's it. I mean, independent of whatever moral judgments there are. And so, I mean, that's it. So don't beat yourself up too much about that. But come back to that gender inequity, because I think society tends to have that same perspective. It's more okay for a woman to be lesbian than it is for a guy to be gay. And I want to ask why. Why is that? Okay, because I think that starts getting to the heart. What does it
Well,
mean?
I think masculinity is more stronger.
Femininity and
It's
the emotion
stronger,
is
and that's
masculinity
something we
is stronger.
value.
Right.
Okay, that's something we value.
Feminism is a little more,
Emotionally acceptable.
well,
Okay,
I think
so-
women in their gender just are more, they're just.
Fluid-like, is how
Yeah,
they
they-
describe it.
Well-
They go with the flow and they can change in different
And-
manners, and men tend to stay
Right.
strong in their
So it
positions.
tends to be about power, and to
Yeah.
move towards anything feminine is to
weaken.
purposefully relinquish that power. And why would you do that? I mean, and that's, I mean, I'm just, you know, and I'm cutting through a whole lot of therapy there in about 30 seconds.
Right on the gay literature. Simplify it down. Why would you give up power?
But that's the theme that keeps being drawn out, is that, you know, that there is something that's just fundamentally wrong about assuming a more feminine role for some reason, you know, for whatever the reason is. And it's okay for a woman, even if she's straight, to present herself in a pantsuit, to be the CEO of a corporation, because that's reaching for the brass ring.
Right.
And that's, you know, it's, you know, all, that's a significant part of it.
So this whole idea of giving up power, I want to explore that a little bit more. Julie, I don't even know your name in your male identity. What's your name?
James,
James, okay. So from your point of view now, at this point in your life, did you like James better or Julie better, and why?
oh, wow, that's a tough question. Well, obviously Julie won the battle. It's like, I guess, every other issue. There's pluses and minuses to all of it. But in order, like we had talked about before, you, as a transgender person, you go through some ridicule from time to time until you get good enough at the presentation that people aren't really sure, you know, what the situation is. And if they're not really sure, most of them are afraid to ask. But if you're compelled inwardly to make that presentation, that's what we do.
Did you have a different personality as?
Most people say that that's true. They say that Jim was quite reserved. Julie is very outgoing, and that type of thing.
Was Jim ever comfortable?
Oh yeah, from time to time, but this issue always came back. There were times that I thought I was just going through a phase. But like so many of the gay and lesbian folks, I tried real hard to be the boy. Jim always had a good-looking woman on his arm, almost always. And I guess if I were to be honest, I do kind of miss that. But there's a price to pay for everything. And so I'm comfortable with who I am. I like who looks back at me from the mirror. And I guess that's the most important thing at this point.
Thank you.
Charissa, I still have a point.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I know that, like, race, I know we discussed race last time. They say that they tend to migrate to the locations, similar locations, like blacks live near blacks, Mexicans, they congregate. Do LGBT people do the same? And, well, because I noticed, I used to live in Grand Haven, and I used to go to Saugatuck a lot. So there was a lot of lesbians, gays up there, and they were very open, but I hear you guys talking about being open, but they were holding hands, kissing, public affection, very normal. And I think the majority of that area is gay and lesbians, and a lot of money up there. So I was just wondering if that's something that attracts gay and lesbians to an area, or do you try to stay away from areas that, like they said, they don't even know? Somebody did said they didn't even know that they had gays and lesbians in Michigan.
For me, that's changed over time. I think when I first came out, I felt a great deal of security going to some place that had a very strong gay identity. The first time that I went to Toronto, and I mean, how fabulous is this? Their gay area is on Queen Street. So the first time I was there, I'm like, I just never want to go home.
Or Chicago.
Yeah, there's Halstead. I mean, that's it. And even in Saginaw, there are neighborhoods that I know about. So yeah, I think that as a group, you can find, just about at any level within a city, within the state, even nationally. I mean, you can point to San Francisco if you want to. So. Okay. What I would say though is that the
Provincetown.
yes, exactly. As I became more comfortable with myself, that became much less important. To the point where I get very frustrated with my friends that move entirely within a gay clique. I'm like, there's so many other people out there that are really, really valuable and interesting. And I mean, in Flint, I would say that where I'm living would not be considered a gay lesbian area at all. I would even say that most of our friends and the people that we associate with are straight. We have the incidental gay friends that we circulate with.
I think that's what's absolutely necessary in order to get some of this legislation passed, because the LGBT community is not large enough
Right.
to, by themselves, say, okay, we're all going to vote for this one bill.
It's not gonna be.
It won't happen.
Right.
And we have to do, like you're saying, and my friend Jill and I always used to say, build a bridge between the straight community and the LGBT community.
Show people that
And
the
develop
differences
more
doesn't
people
define
like
you.
Lauren
It's just
that-
part of who you are.
Yeah.
As far as the public displays of affection go, that, I picked DJ up at the airport. He was coming in from Montreal, and just when he got past the security gates, he came over, he hugged me, and he gave me a kiss, and there were about 10 people that just about threw their neck out of whack. And I don't know that it necessarily, I'm never entirely comfortable with that sort of thing. I mean, I certainly didn't stop him, and I reciprocated, because my relationship with him is much more important than what those folks were experiencing at the time. But I would say, I don't know that either one of us are terribly demonstrative, but in situations like that, yeah, we'll do it. And I don't really see it as an issue. I mean, that's you just do it, and if we don't walk down the street in Flint holding hands, but we do walk down the street, and most everyone in our neighborhood knows that we're a couple at this point. So
And that's part of the reason why folks go to those areas where they feel safe. So if you were to go to a large city, any large city, you can find a gay area, and sometimes it's just the gay area with gay-friendly shops and stores and bars, or it's an entire neighborhood where most folks that live there are gay. But then you can feel more comfortable to do all the things that you do normally anyways. Hold hands or give your wife or significant other a kiss. I mean, those are things that people do naturally. Except for gay people, sometimes have to think twice, is it safe to do that? In Saugatuck, it's safe to do that. That doesn't, but there are going to be some folks there it's going to cause them a little discomfort because they've never seen it before. But I mean, I guess maybe my question to you would be, when you see that and it's different, do you say to yourself, but that's just like if I were to do that with my wife?
Yeah.
Is that what you say to yourself, or do you say they should do it?
The first time I...
Because this is Michigan.
Yeah, the first time I had just moved there to Grand Haven, and so the first time I visited Saugatuck, and I hadn't really heard a lot of the stories I heard after, but so we were there at an ice cream shop, and we were in line, and there was a couple behind us, well, it was, two guys, and I thought I seen them holding hands, and then I just stood there for a minute. I was almost afraid to turn around and look, and I told my wife, I think they're holding hands. I just casually turned around, and they were holding hands, and they didn't, very normal, just like me and her were, no big deal. So it did shock me, but it wasn't like, let's leave, let's get out of here. No, it was just, shocking that.
You don't see that around the
Yeah,
Tri-Cities so
well,
much.
that the affection was in public.
Right, right.
Not that, there were a couple, like, if you guys are just walking, you can tell, but to actually hold hands and...
I'm willing to bet that you're going to see a little bit more in Saugatuck than in other areas,
Yeah,
because
definitely.
it's something of a destination, and there's a bar in Douglas, it's called the Dunes, and that can be a little bit crazier than your regular bar.
And I've been to bars in Saugatuck.
And so people that go there are kind of looking to be able to,
More expressive.
yeah, you're going to see.
Yeah.
In Saugatuck for sure, and in Ann Arbor for sure, you will regularly see same-sex, people holding hands or whatever.
So I guess I'm just thinking about this area, I don't witness that very often at all, if ever. I might see a couple that you can tell that, are a couple, but I don't see them have the closeness that me or my wife,
Right.
have together, So
And I
it's
think,
just-
The reason for that is because there's enough signals that you pick up if you live in this area that you know that you probably shouldn't do that.
Right.
And I don't know that that's a good thing. It just is. I don't know that it's a bad thing. It's just the way it is.
Right.
And there's lots of little clues. People, I had a ring at one point that had, it looked like, almost like it had an African design to it. It was just triangles. And I went into a bank and made a deposit. And the teller looked at my hand, took an inordinately long time looking at my hand, looked back up at me and said, I have a cousin who would really like that ring.
I thought you were saying to meet you.
And at the time I was trying to come up with an account for a student group on this campus, and the conversation just shifted. Well, then let's see what we can do for you. And that was, and that sort of thing that just said it all right there. And
I think also, it goes also with some of the racism that we've talked about too. The more comfortable you are, the more comfortable white people are with Hispanics in their neighborhood and blacks in their neighborhood, the more comfortable, other people can be with gays in their neighborhood. And it's just, I lived in a lot of places where it was not accepted, and I was very careful all the time. And I also lived in some places that were more accepting. You can't always, due to your job or whatever, be where, you can't always live in a Sagatuck or a province town. It's just not possible. So, and the biggest thing for me too is I choose friends based on their healthiness, not whether they're straight or gay. So I have about half and half. I have tons of gay friends and I have tons of straight friends.
Based on their healthiness?
Based on their healthiness.
how healthy they are to relate to.
Right.
The interactions of
Yeah.
Interaction
Emotional
and
health.
emotional health.
emotional health. Right,
You,
sorry,
um,
emotional health.
When he made the comment that it would be easier for a woman than for a man to live in an alternative lifestyle, you seemed to cringe.
I
A little
did.
bit. You did. What were some of the difficulties that you went through? Yeah, because your body language said, wait a minute, that's not so.
And to be fair, I didn't say it was easy. I said easier.
No, you made the comment that it would be easier for a woman to
Right.
be in that position than a man.
Yeah,
And you
and I
seemed
think,
to withdraw from that comment.
well, actually, I was really thinking about Julie, is what I was thinking about, because it's not only a gay man being more flamboyant or more feminine if he wants to be, but also, a trans person making that huge leap from male and everything, all the power that goes with that, head of a family, main breadwinner, whatever, and all that male stuff, that's big, heavy stuff, and
Especially
changing.
living in a truck stop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a hard row there.
right.
There are many, many gay and lesbian individuals who can hide. That you don't know whether somebody is, and they can live their whole life that way, and they can, go behind closed doors and do whatever they want. But it's harder if you're a trans individual. It's not that it's apparent all the time, but it's usually a little bit more difficult. Julie's pulling it off pretty well, and I have some other friends like Jill, and they just. But there's a period where you're growing into it.
Yeah, it takes a little while to get into it, but anymore, now that I don't have to go to work every day, I try to find things to do. So I play euchre in a couple of tournaments at least twice a week. I'm on a pool league, and I play pool once a week. And most everybody there, I'm sure that perhaps some of those people know my business, but not all of them, and nobody seems to question, although I did have an interesting situation occur a week ago or so. I met this fellow, a gay man that I had met before, and I was at a euchre tournament at the KSC Hall over in Bay City, and we also played pool there. And anyway, after the tournament was done, he came up and approached me, and said he'd like to chat with me, but didn't think that that would be a good location, being as all it was the Knights of Columbus Hall. But so we chatted at the bar for a few minutes, and he wanted to go to a better location, which I said was okay. But the bartender, I guess, slipped him a note, because one of the guys on my pool team is a gay guy, and his sister is on the Knights of Columbus team. So I presume that the sister, because of my friendship with her brother, knew about my business. But the bartender slips a note to the guy, not knowing that he's gay, saying, "You better be careful, she might not be exactly what you think."
Wow.
But to answer your question, I was very blessed. I didn't, I worried more about my dad than in his, because he was very, person's gay because their parents raised them wrong.
Yeah.
They let the girls be too much of a tomboy, and I mean, he was just beating himself up. So that was
A lot of parents do that.
Yeah, and that I worried more about him. There was one job, one boss that completely changed her mind. She loved me the first year because I did all kinds of things to help her with the science committee and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And then some parents came to her, 2 parents from a neighborhood, and then the next year she was blackballing me. So, and then that particular year, it wasn't just because I was leaving, but there was like 40 people leaving because she was such a bad principal. But that happened. And I had one friend that I was very close to in my early 20s, and when she found out, she stopped talking to me. But that's not too bad for 50 years. I was run off the road once. I was me and a couple other lesbians on a soccer team, and it was a bunch of rednecks outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and they saw the bumper sticker. So that was kind of scary. But I haven't, fortunately, I haven't had as much harassment and bullying as many people have.
Lots of people don't know and don't realize that you can be blackballed in the state of Michigan by your supervisor or whoever, and actually fired simply for being gay. There's no protection. It's not a protected class.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. If the organization adopts the position that they won't, then they're bound by their own set of rules, but it's not a state mandate.
In other words, Delta has a non-discrimination policy, and written in there is sexual orientation and gender identity. But if
That
didn't
did not
exist-
happen.
That was federal law.
Oh,
And Delta did not adopt that until the board meeting that they adopted that was the same night as 9/11.
Oh, wow.
So it was,
recently.
yeah.
It was recent.
PJ, are you up? Do you have a question?
I don't. Everybody else kind of took all the ones that I had gathered up.
Then you want to tell us any part of your story?
Well, I actually have 2 gay parents. They were actually got together when they were really young and had a family and everything. Actually, I know Miss Julie. She lives right around the block from my mom, Vicki.
Oh, yeah.
And that was very difficult growing up in a situation. Actually, I didn't know how rare it was to have a gay dad and a lesbian mother until I tried to research it for an English paper. And I guess this doesn't happen as much as I thought it did. So that's this is a great panel for me because I'm a great advocate for it. I'm very pro, I'm very open. Having 2 gay parents makes you like that. It makes you very open to other people's differences.
That's just the thing. I mean, I can't, like, I sit here and think, I have a gay brother, you have 2 gay parents, your father was gay. And it seems like everyone I know is some way connected or related to the gay community.
Sure.
And it's like, I don't understand how they couldn't be more supportive if they're connected.
I think some people really struggle with religion. My mom
Yeah.
does not accept me. at all, and neither does my brother,
Yeah.
who's a deacon in the Catholic Church. My other siblings are great.
Yeah. I think that might have been my dad's issue too.
Yeah, it's,
But yeah,
they have trouble with their religion.
it's just a conflicting
Yeah.
belief system, I guess.
And I've had several students who have come to me either through Unison, which is our student group here, or through Safe Space, which is our faculty staff kind of training to help folks who have struggled with coming out. And I've had lots of folks that have gone through that process. This is a prime time to go through it, your early college years. But then, you know, you're really talking about coming out, making major changes, telling your family. And you know, we've gone step by step through that process. And I have found that the ones that come from religious homes,
First time.
oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's just so hard. It just, you know, my heart goes out to them. It is very difficult. And the ones that don't come from religious homes, the more educated the parents are, or the more, you know, the more they're informed, the easier it is. So it's just a question of.
It's kind of like Dave was saying, that those folks that are so steeped in religious beliefs, they only have one truth that they recognize. And so it makes it difficult to deal with that.
How could you grow up loving someone, your brother, okay, and then as an adult you find out that your brother's gay and all of a sudden you hate it?
Change, yeah.
I mean, he's still your brother. He's still a guy you played soccer with.
There's just something in your brain that doesn't allow
I
you to be able to understand.
What it is this a disappointment and a betrayal, I think. That it's the belief that that was actually a choice, that that person decided that this is how they were going to be, as opposed to reporting out this is how it is. Does that make it, does that, you know, I mean, that's it. Both my parents were very supportive, but for the friends of mine that haven't been supportive, it was very much seen as a betrayal. How, you know, the emotional response was, how could you do this to me? And
But that comes back to me. Your lifestyle is your lifestyle.
and that's the betrayal piece. Yeah, and that's, you know, so that's where I would come from it. You know, that they and they're looking at this, you know, their world order says that there are going to be things that are more important than the relationship that I have with my brother or my son or, you know, my sister or my spouse or whatever. That these are bigger, more arching issues. They cover that umbrella is bigger, and that's the choice that they've made. My question is how many of them realize that that was a choice? Yeah, I mean, they're saying that mine was a choice. I'm going to ask them if theirs was.
Right.
One last, do you have a question?
I don't know.
Anybody want one last question? Other topics we haven't touched on?
What about, actually I do. When I used to spend a lot of time down in East Lansing at MSU campus, my friend Katie, she'd go there all the time, and so, and me and her were like really tight and everything, so I'd go down all the time. And she spent a lot of time with a lot of these girls, and over time, I didn't even know, but apparently most of them were lesbians. And I began to notice that I was feeling almost left out of the group. Like in a sense, almost I was being discriminated against because I didn't like girls. And actually, for a couple months, I began to question my own sexuality and if I was actually attracted to the other girls. And it was a little difficult time, but finally I told myself, I'm not, I asked myself a bunch of times, and it's like, I don't think so, and I'm not gonna change myself just so I can hang out with them. And, a lot of them now, I talk to them, we're good friends now, but just for a certain time, it just felt like I was the one who was left out because I wasn't bi or I wasn't lesbian. So I don't really know how that could be a question, but it's more of an experience.
I think that happens as people are coming to terms with who they are. They need to insulate themselves a little bit to to get their orientation, to figure out what direction they're going. And I think that new people, sometimes it takes a little bit more vetting. I'm not really ready to let someone in that close yet, and I need to see what they're about. Because I've been hurt a lot of times. I mean, you know, the high school was not a pleasant experience for me, and yeah, it was. I couldn't wait to get that hell out of high school.
But, and I think part of it was what Julie said too, about you learning what yourself was, you know, just, you know, checking in with yourself and being comfortable with yourself. And true friends are going to like you whether you are or not,
Absolutely.
you know, and
Absolutely.
then accept you for who you are or not anywhere on the scale. So,
And there's also there's always the risk when you're coming out of losing the relationship. And it's difficult. So the more important the relationship is, the greater that risk is, which is why a lot of people come out to their family last. And if your friend that had been inviting you to East Lansing was uncertain, you know, I had guy friends that I knew were straight, but I valued the relationship with them. And I didn't want to come out to them because I didn't necessarily want them to think that I was interested in them and for them to be uncomfortable and this to become a barrier in a relationship. So I don't know how much of this was actually part of the dynamic there, but
And
I think it can be.
in a way that it is not negative. I mean, they were going through something and sharing something together that you weren't a part of, you know, because you were straight, you know, and so they were having sort of a different experience. And it is interesting to sort of be the hetero amongst the gay folks. I used to hang out with my friend when he lived in the Village in New York, and his friends would advise us, look, don't go to that bar, they don't like women there, they don't want to see straight people in there. I don't know if that kind of thing still goes on quite as much, you know, but I think, I don't know, and other people can obviously speak more to this. It seems like the gay identity is such a hard-fought one to get anyway. And then to have to keep explaining that to people and constantly be confronting that difference, you know, it's just got to be very, very difficult. And I'm the advisor for Unison, and I had thought before, well, should I be doing this because I'm straight? Maybe there's a gay or bi staff person here who should be doing it instead. I talked about it with a friend, and he said the thing is, we need people like you. You represent the majority. You know, who better than you to show how differences, how these aren't important, you know? So.
It's self-serving if we're. It really
Sure,
it is.
of
I mean,
course.
I was the faculty advisor for the student group for a number of years, and I mean, besides it being just exhausting, it ends up being. It really does come across as self-serving. It's a much more powerful message when somebody who
It's coming from
isn't
someone outside.
suffering it, who can't be classified as a victim, is
Right.
up there delivering the message to.
When I tell students that I don't laugh exactly, but I can see the equation going through their minds, okay, when I say it, because then they're trying to figure out whether I'm gay or not. And they sit there and like, wait, did you mention this past? You know, I can see the whole process happening, and so I kind of appreciate that about it. I don't know if we've given you useful feedback or.
Oh, yeah. Plus, she has an answer for her final exam, so it's okay. All right. Well, we want to thank all of you for taking time and to come and be with us today and share your story. So, thank you.